what's the thing that you want maybe readers your age, because you're in your mid-20s, really the heart of the story is 15 to 20 years ago, back in elementary school days, and then you kind of fill in. I remember more than Sydney does up through about 6th grade. So I kind of put that in, and then you kind of come in from middle school on. So what's the kind of lived experience part that you think is really important for families to understand now as an adult, looking back on some of the things you experienced as a child?
So whenever we would do conferences together or speaking engagements, or whenever we would, share my story before you wrote the original version of the book, it was typically always you presenting my story as a hope to other parents that it does get better, that your child is not destined for failure. They're not, waste of time, waste of space. So
I never said, by the way, I just need to clarify that. Maybe other people in the story said that, but not the mom. Okay, go ahead. Back to you. So
okay.
You hear people sharing me.
And you threw me off my groove. Give me a second to recollect the train. The train jumped to like a different track. Give me a second to get back on track. So kind of how I always saw our story was a story of hope, that autism isn't, this terrible end all be all, like final nail in the coffin on your family. But from the perspective of someone who is autistic, you always hear, you're not going to amount to anything. You're weird. You're stupid. All just sorts of negativity from people on the outside. And it's very easy to fall into a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I guess what I'm hoping that those who are my age, or maybe a little bit younger, or even if they're a little bit further down the road, that you don't have to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. You are not what other people say you are. How your autism defines you is up to you and only you. If you want to be a self-fulfilling prophecy and that's the road you choose, that's all on you. It is not on your diagnosis. It's on the actions that you make as a result of it. So that's something that I really tried to emphasize, particularly in like where I am now. Like I have my master's degree. I am living independently across the country. I have a kitten now. I am thriving out here, and I didn't fall into any of the traps that people said I was going into. So that's probably what I want the main takeaway to be, is you are in control of your future and your destiny in terms of how people label you and what you define yourself as. You don't have to be a self-fulfilling prophecy.
All right. So I'm going to circle back around on that, because in junior high, middle school, and high school, you did not think that way. But be pausing about that, the question I will ask you in a moment after you process is your changing opinion about being on the spectrum, because what you're saying right now has not always been.
Yes, absolutely. I definitely believed I was just kind of going to live a mediocre life. Autism is the reason I didn't have friends. It was the reason I got picked on. It's the reason I got bullied. That was my perspective in middle school and high school. You are absolutely correct. And that shift probably didn't really happen until sophomore, junior year of college, if I'm going to be 100% honest with myself. So that shift in mindset happened when I found really good friends who accepted me for me, even after I mentioned the big, scary autism word that most people shy away from. So I think that really helped shift my mindset in college. But middle school and high school, I definitely blamed all of my social relationship problems on my autism diagnosis.
Okay. Now, did you have any perspective, negative, positive, or neutral, about being ADHD? Because I mean, you were diagnosed at like 3, 4-ish. Well, first originally it was PDD, NOS, pervasive developmental disorder, not other specified. But then became ADD, inattentive type. Did you ever have any kind of stigma about having ADHD and being neurodivergent in that perspective?
Well, to be honest, I think while I technically knew that I had ADHD, it was never a label I even really believed I had until I got to college and actually saw more of the symptoms keeping me from being able to do things I want to do in school. Because for the most part, I was able to kind of get through school and, I'm late to up late till 4 a.m., but that's what all people do. Or, oh, I'm just sitting on the floor and I can't move, but that's fine. So I didn't really see those as symptoms of my ADHD. And so I don't really think I felt a stigma because I don't think I really truly saw myself as that until more recently. And since also, as I mentioned in the book, I did a lot of comparing myself to my sister. So I really saw myself as a neurotypical normal, which meant anything I was doing, as long as it wasn't sending me down a horrible rabbit hole, like what I might see her doing, then I was doing great. And so it was just like, if I'm not spiraling, that means I'm thriving. I didn't really see myself pushing past that.
Okay. And so we'll come back in a minute to your journey in high school, not high school, college. That's when you really started kind of looking through things through a different perspective. All right. For you, Mr. Man sitting here beside me, I received someone speaking to me about your part of the book. We have about 10 to 12 people reading the book right now for endorsements or giving what's your feedback of the book. And the person said that actually your stuff that you put in has so far been the most powerful and touching to them in the story. So
that was by accident.
Yeah. Dan's is not a long part at the end of every chapter, but apparently it's like a chat GPT. It does a very good, succinct summary. But so talk about your kind of hindsight learning, because that's what we've titled your part of the book. So I'm kind of the historian and kind of chatting through what's going on. And then if I'm reading your perspective correctly, a lot of the hindsight learning you're doing while you're writing the book, you're doing it while you're writing the chapter and not, 10 years ago. It's pretty recent.
That's true. I think a lot of what I recognized came out with pen as the sentence flows, like, wow, that was all in there. But most of it really is that. It was, it's, I don't know, regret laced with hope, maybe. Because, a lot of things could have been different. A lot of things could have been better. Go read the book home to go give the details of that. But, you look back and you think, what, if I would have known, the whole thing is if I'd have known, if I'd have been able to do, if I'd have thought that way, if I'd have, some other thing. But with that recollection, now there's the opportunity to switch from, well, I can't do anything about all of those activities, but I can as of tomorrow or the next 10 minutes or from some point beyond right now, exercise what I wish I'd have known then in the moment. And that's a lot of what that is just a recognition of I missed some windows to influence well, and I can do better.
So if we were to put our family on a introvert, not very chatty to extrovert chatty spectrum, and we started with the introvert spectrum, there'd be Dan way off in the distance
on an island surrounded by sharks.
And then there'd be Sydney, who's introverted. You can be extroverted, but you're not extroverted. You can be social, but it's training to you. I'm actually an ambivert. I can sometimes be introverted, extroverted. And then here's Erica on a different island. She's on Party Island, wanting much more social interaction and engagement and, more chattiness. And so just those four things, dynamics in the family. So girls, I'm going to toss a question to you. I know Sid's read the whole manuscript. Did you read all of the manuscript or some?
I read it except for Dad's last part that he added.
Okay, so you guys living with Dad, who's on the island sometimes to himself, surrounded by sharks, in introvert land, what is something that y'all kind of read or saw for the first time from what your dad's perspective was, since he's not usually chatty and just articulating feelings and all of that? What's something you remember that kind of stood out to you from reading Dad's perspective?
You're looking at me, but I'm still processing.
You're still processing. All right, Sydney, you read it most recently. Maybe there's something there for you. Okay, start with you.
So as I was reading Dad's stuff, I know growing up, Dad was pretty quiet. He was home. We'd have like a random interesting question of the day question at dinner every once in a while or something, just to have like a conversation at dinner. But for the most part, I remember Dad being really, really quiet. So I was reading his perspective. I'm like, whoa, Dad has words. That's so cool.
I love that. There was a lot going on in here.
Right? I was just like, wow, all right. So he was thinking, and like he was present, just in his own way. So but it was nice to read Dad's thoughts and feelings, even if they were, kind of more like my stuff, where it was more hindsight and not so much in the moment. Kind of like my area, kind of recognizing like, yeah, this was a pretty great moment, or I definitely could have handled that significantly better. So it was nice to read another perspective from someone else who is neurodivergent in general. Like, oh, I'm not alone. But then also like, wow, that's my dad. Like, that's a cool guy. So I had more of a I had more of a sense of kind of a little bit of pride. Like, yeah, that's my dad. He's pretty cool, and this may not have been what I experienced growing up, but it's what I have now.
The coolness had to evolve.
Yeah, I've never been cool.
Right. All right. Toss that question to you, reading Dad's perspective.
I guess reading his perspective gave you more insight of you guys' relationship, because I don't really think his hindsight had too much about what I was doing at the time, because it was mainly what Sydney's teachers were doing at the time that was causing all the issues, or Sydney causing some of the issues. With that being said, though, I got to kind of see more of how y'all's relationship has formed, because I was not privy to any of that as a child. And so to see, from the outside looking in, I just thought, man, Dad's quiet. And I actually used to think, how does Mom talk to him? And so now I know they actually do know how to talk to each other, but just without me.
But it's got to be in a private setting.
It's nice to see that because when you're a child, you think they're your parents. They're in a constant, a stable perspective, and they will never change because they are your parents, and they don't grow. They just are. They just do things. And that's what parents do. And so to see that there was growth even in their relationship, when just think, oh, they're my parents. They go to work and they do the things. They come back and they're nice, and that's great. That's what you think of parents. So to see them as their own individuals with human thoughts and problems and mistakes is, I think, important as a child when you start to grow up.